I was at a party. It was in the 80s, and I was hanging out in discos with people, and there were lots of drugs around. And I was at a party, and there was cocaine flowing. So I had done some at the party, and when the party was over, stupidly, I brought the man home who had the drugs. So we continued to do it at my house, and it never, ever once entered my mind that I could overdose. I never thought of it. I don't know why. It should have, it didn't. And I just kept doing it. All of a sudden, he just looked at me and said, "Oh my God, I'm in trouble." He grabbed his bag of drugs and ran out the door. And I got scared. And then I started shaking, and I shook for days. Um, I then, when I finally came down enough, which probably was like 2 days, when I should have called 911. I was embarrassed. I didn't, stupid. At that point, I was finally able to lay down, and I thought maybe I can sleep. And as soon as I lay down, I got a really sharp pain in my heart. And for a second, I knew what was going on. And for a second, I fought it, and then all of a sudden, this peace came over me, and I just let go. And I found myself in this blue-black area. It was just all, I couldn't really, like swirling blue-black. And there was a presence, a very large presence in front of me, a bodiless presence, that said to me that you have done everything you came here to do in this lifetime, so you can leave.
As a result of pertussis and going to the playground, I suffocated climbing a ladder up on a slide, at the top of the ladder. And after suffocation, my whole body, wasn't working. It was just one layer of my body that stopped working and out of my control. And all of a sudden, everything just powered down within my body and within my brain, and I really crossed over to the other side and had this, incredible near-death experience. I encountered a limiting word, but a universal word of understanding of God, of the source of all that ever is and ever was. I encountered endless array of angels and spiritual guides, soul family members, awareness of my own, purpose as a soul, and even past life awareness. Within my own near-death experience, I was aware of two guides that I had, a male and a female guide, that were with me. They were the most profound, beautiful guides that I could describe. They were beyond words. But also, and I chronicle this in Life After Breath, that I just couldn't remember that I forgot that they were there with me on each step of the journey. It was almost embarrassing on my end that I forgot that, wow, they were there with me. And there was a transparency that sometimes we just view that we're isolated in this experience, that there's no one else watching us, but there's record button there, but there's not only that, but there's unconditional loving support on the other side from a soul family members as well as our own spiritual guides. That's different from the angels that I saw in my near-death experience, in which my body was on the ground, irresponsive, after going down the slide, climbing the ladder, going down the slide, people looking at me. I saw an endless sea of angels that was right in front of me. And these are very youthful in their presentation, and they looked almost identical. But the distinguishing component between my spirit guides and the angels that I saw, they all are grouped under angels, was that the spirit guides were a lot more grounded, and kind of connected to myself and this earth. Whereas the angels that I saw, they were like just kind of doing their thing. They weren't focused on me, but they were focused on the macro kind of healing of the planet. And they didn't have separate identity. They were just kind of unified. They were just there to love and serve the planet. So what I really learned from that, and for viewers listening, is the near-death experience, parts of it felt like I was going a million miles away from anything that this earth reality was. But then again, not really too, because parts of this were just a thin veil, a thin layer right over this earth plane.
Yeah, I was just a kid coming home from school, messing around. I think you call it the sidewalk. We call it the pavement. And we have a curb on that pavement. I stepped off of the pavement, literally into the path of an oncoming car, and it hit me. I was thrown across the road. And as I was thrown, the trajectory took me across the road and I literally landed on my head. And as I landed, there was no pain. I have to emphasize that there was no pain. There was this huge crack. I heard this crack. It was like really dry wood. And then I saw a flash and I was out of my body. It was just like that.
Wow.
And traveling at enormous speed upwards.
Okay.
And that was how I came out of my body. Yeah.
Body was presence that said to me that you have done everything you came here to do in this lifetime, so you can leave. And this is what I wanted to do. I had 2 children, but at that moment, it was just like when you wake up in the morning from a dream. They were dream figures. They weren't for real. I mean, I had nothing to do with them or the world. It was just like, as I said, when you wake up from a dream in the morning, you don't, go running back into the dream to fix it. You just leave it and wake up. So then I was shown the world, and I was told that if I stayed back in the world, if I stayed in the world, that the results would be perfect peace in the world. So I was shown the world in perfect peace. It was just, I can't explain it. I could see the smallest, tiniest ant and the largest everything at the same time. There was no space or time. I could just see it all at the same time. So I really felt I didn't really have much of a choice. If we can have world peace, maybe I should go back in there. So I said I would go back, and then I was given a second opportunity. I was told the exact same thing again. I'm going to give you another chance. You can go back, but you can leave because you finished everything that you hadn't finished. Oh yeah, the other thing is that this presence said to me that I had started something in the world, and that if I went back, I could finish it, and that would be the result of the peace in the world. So when I was given the second chance, I once again said that I would go back, and at that moment, there were what felt like millions of presences behind me on my level. They seemed to be on the same level as me, and they were just dancing and whooping and hollering and so excited that I was going back to do what I had started. So I went back into my body. I literally bounced right off the bed. I mean, not off the bed, but like this on the bed when I went back into my body. And I was fine. When I got up, I was fine. There was a little bit of cocaine on the table. I threw it away. And my life completely changed after that.
So the angels are around us constantly, and they're floating around, here. They're right here. And so I think if we listen enough, we tune into that enough, they could assist us. They could assist us with loving compassion, wisdom, the ability to just, have those veils not as separated. Because really, yes, we're here to create heaven on earth, but we're also beings of heaven here on this earth. If we remember that, this world could be such a different place.
When you say assist us, you mean mentally, emotionally, spiritually, or can they physically come in with our permission and assist us physically on this plane?
They can. We just have to be open to it. I know there's been people who have had, and it's when it's your time, we all have different exit points, but I think there are people who've had like a lot of like physical illnesses, and beings from the other side have worked, and they've seen that, they've worked with their experiences, and they have these modern miracles that, doctors aren't able to really, understand how they were on the brink, and then all of a sudden something internally totally shifted. So yes, they work with us medically where they could manipulate the body or get it kind of adjusted and corrected, or something that was totally broken to be fixed. So the miracles happen by these beings. You just have to kind of be open to that, allow that, recognize, that, and surrender to that. So many of us in this human experience have clung on to the ego and forgotten our essence, our soul, and who we are and where we come from. We're more likely to hold on to this temporary identity versus having some degree of recollection of something beyond this. And I think plenty do, but it takes an empowered soul to remember something more than what we were taught.
And what did you see as you were traveling visually?
Initially, the ground going away underneath me. But then it was like people talk about going down a tunnel. I wonder whether that's actually the rushing, the speed. It feels like you're traveling through something, but it was just rushing and being lifted. And then there was a moment where I realized that I was in what we would call space. Mm-hmm. It was a darkened sky, there were stars around, and I had a moment, a millisecond of apprehension because I couldn't feel anything beneath my feet. And at that point, I then felt something, and I was stood on very solid ground somewhere. And I was in this place of space, and around me was the most beautiful vibration of love. It was just pure love. So that's how I got to where I was going.
There's studies done that they say that it's just your mind is I don't know what words to use, but
lack of oxygen to the brain and all that.
Right, exactly, yeah. So I haven't made any final decisions. I have no idea. I don't know what happens after that. I do know that I was being drawn to leave. Mm-hmm. I could feel like this pull to leave. Yeah, I normal. I think, yeah. Not much. I put it that way. I probably less than normal.
Okay.
Because I have had some other experiences in my life, so that might be why. And my mother there was a picture of the Virgin Mary hanging in my bedroom, this little picture. And my mother calls me into the living room. They had the TV on, and she says to me, "Oh, look at that. In Rome, there's this same picture that you have hanging in your bedroom. There's a picture of the Virgin Mary crying." And it was one of those, I'm sure you've seen them on the news with its weeping. So now I'm terrified. I'm 7 years old. I do not want this picture to start weeping in the middle of the night. So every night before I go to bed, I take it and I'd hide it in my dresser under my stuff. And I didn't want to tell my mother because I knew she'd say, "Oh, that's silly." So I just kept hiding it every night. And then one night I could hear it. I was sure she was crying in my dresser. So I went out and told my mother I had a nightmare, and she says, "Well, you can go sleep in my bed." So I went in her room. As soon as I laid down, she had a crucifix on the wall opposite the bed. The crucifix, all of a sudden this light came out of the crucifix. And I remember it lit up, and it was a white I've never seen before. It's not the white you see here. It's a different white. And it lit up the whole room, and she had a big window in her room. And all I kept thinking is, I wonder what the neighbors are thinking, seeing this white light, if they can see it. So then this sort of shadowy figure formed, and it was what I believed to be Jesus. It came in a form that I would understand and recognize. And he sat on the bed next to me, and he stroked my head, and he told me never to be afraid, that he loved me and he'd always take care of me. And after that, he had his arms around me, and I don't know what happened for a long time. I mean, I know time had passed, and I feel like we went somewhere or something happened. And then after that, he just, he said it again at the end. He said, "Don't be afraid. I love you and I'll always take care of you." And he just went back up into the crucifix. The light stayed for quite a long time. And I was a very fearful child. I was loaded with fear. It wasn't a great house I was growing up in. And I was very fearful. And for the longest time, I had no fear.
Plenty of near-death experiencers in their own experience have had nothing to do with the prior life that they lived in many ways. By that, I mean, I grew up Jewish Orthodox, Jewish traditional, observance, but within my near-death experience, there was nothing of that. And many people who have religions or atheistic, agnostics, whatever the case may be, their near-death experience has nothing to do with their prior belief systems, usually. So that was profound in the sense that, I had all these beings that I guess were deeply rooted within the Bible from angels. If you look at the Bible, it's highly mystical, but yet, religion kind of focuses on the rituals and laws of things. They don't get into that as much. They're more about, okay, what can we do in this life versus that kind of mystical kind of stuff. But it's there if you look deeply. But it wasn't something that was taught or really highly focused on. And especially the encounter with Christ consciousness that I had. And certainly, Jesus himself was, Jewish, grew up in Israel, but was more of a reform social kind of rabbi, but certainly wasn't someone that was accepted, or just highlighted within my upbringing.
So,
I would say the biggest transformation was from fear to love, which is at the core of any. I know we classify near-death experience and we focus it on one thing, but to me, they're all very similar paths up the mountain of awareness, from a spiritual transformative experience to an NDE to an OBE. I look at them as one and the same to me. They're just kind of different ways, but they all involve some. I guess the near-death experience is different because it involves a shakeup of the physical body, and its continuity, through traumatic events or through illness, whatever it is. And so you crossing that rubber band over, and then obviously when you have a near-death experience, you don't stay there, you come back, but you come back much different. I was incredibly fearful through suffocation. That was one of the most traumatic and scariest moments of my life to this day. I don't want to sugarcoat that. So I think that's part of the reason why I remembered it is the trauma, that was involved with it, which is something that isn't as highlighted in near-death experience. But if you look at, let's say, the IANDS website, International Association of Near-Death Studies, they don't just have the euphoric highlights of near-death experiences. They also include distressing ones. And I can't say mine was a full distressing experience, but certainly, the beginning onset was quite distressing. But once I was able to surrender to a greater power of my own suffering, my own struggle, was when I was able to cross over. And so when I lost my own physical breath of my body, I was able to surrender to the breath of eternity. Hence the title of my book, Life After Breath, which emphasizes the breath as something that goes beyond the body, but also enhances our experience here. It's our lifeline in this physical body, and it's our lifeline when we cross over. Surrendering to the eternal breath is something we do here and the here now and the hereafter.
I was in this beautiful place, and at that point I just knew that my body was elsewhere and I was somewhere else, and I was existing. I could hear very well. All my senses seemed to be heightened. I was aware of a lot of people around, but I couldn't see them. I could hear voices, and they had some concern, in the sense of you would be concerned for somebody. Are they all right? And it was just this beautiful, overwhelming, pulsating vibration of it's love. It's just pure love. And I wanted to be there. There was no questioning. It was just a nice place to be. It was the people that were there. There were souls there. I didn't see them like I can see you now. I was just aware of being surrounded by a lot of people, if that makes sense. There's a lot that I can't clarify, and say that was, no, this was people that were around me, loving me. I became aware of one individual who was a lady, very, very beautiful lady. And she stood in front of what appeared to be what I would call here a large, tall hedge.
Okay.
It was some sort of foliage. And it was like she was stood in front of that. And in this hedge, there were flowers, the most beautiful flowers. They had massive heads on them. But I remember thinking, I don't know what those colours are. There are no colours like that I've seen in the physical world. They made a sound, and that drew my attention, but the whole focus really was on this thing with her. And I remember looking at her and thinking how very beautiful this creature, this lady was. And people have asked me since and said, oh, was it a religious? No, it was a beautiful lady, and she shimmered. And this is quite hard to say. She was made from light, and it was almost like it came out of everything, and it was love. It was, I keep saying this word, it was love.
Yeah.
And she looked at me, and I at her, and I have to tell you, I'm very happy to be there. But she spoke to me, but not like I'm speaking to you with words. She made me understand that I really shouldn't be there, and that I needed to go return. This was not my place. And I remember sort of like in my childlike way thinking, well, I would like to stay here very much, please. And there was no revelation. There was no like, you must go back because you have work to do. I've heard of that happening. I just understood that for now, I couldn't be there, but I would at some point return later. The other thing that I do remember was that I kind of recognized this place. I recognized her, but nothing that I could say, more than that. And it was at the point where I understood that I needed not to be there or couldn't stay there, that I found myself back on the pavement, and I had a huge pain in my head. And I remember some kid going, "Is she dead, mister?" And I was being lifted into the ambulance and taken to the hospital. So it was a matter of minutes, but it was so profound that it has carried me. I'm now 65, and it's carried me through my life. It was so very, very beautiful, because that love, there are no words. That love, that total acceptance of us, there was compassion, there was truth, there was just beautiful love. And it's not just for me, it's for everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Is that I said that I would stay, but only until I did that. And as soon as I did finished what I started to do, I wanted out. That was it. And so I'm assuming I still have whatever it is I haven't finished yet, because I'm still here. At first, I thought that I was going to perform some great miracle and just wave my hands and the world would be at peace. And I was just going to do this grandiose thing. As I'd gotten older, I realized that it was talking about my little tiny corner of the world. It was going to be that I could bring peace. It maybe just even meant peace in my own mind, that I could see the world from a peaceful place. No matter what's going on, I could still be at a place of peace.